The following may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Petition delivered to Parliament by Candlelight Movement. A petition signed by over 128,000 people calling on government to allow women to use non-lethal defensive weapons such as pepper spray has been delivered to the Parliament. The Candlelight Movement, which was formed after the abduction and murder of Arima Court Clerk Andrea Barrett in February, now intends to lobby parliamentarians for the registration and regulation of PH taxis, a fast-tracking system for women to obtain a firearm user's license, tighter measures to issue number plates, and a commission of inquiry into the criminal justice system. Leader of the movement, Philip Edward Alexander, said he hopes the issues will be debated in Parliament. On Tuesday, a group of just over a dozen people delivered the petition signed by 128,527 people to a member of the Parliament's mailroom at Cabildo Chambers. The petition was also signed by Barrett's father, Randolph Barrett, and Pauline Lumfi, mother of 6-year-old Sean Luke, who was erased in 2006. The two men who were teenagers at the time of his demise were found guilty in September. A minimum sentence of 17 years, 6 months, and 13 days at the court's pleasure was imposed on 28-year-old Akil Mitchell, with period reviews every 3 years. His next review comes up on September 13, 2024. His accomplice, 31-year-old Richard Chatou, received a term of detention of 11 years, 6 months, and 13 days at the court's pleasure. He too will return in 3 years for a sentence review by a judge. Prison officer's 4-year-old daughter dances at his funeral. The 4-year-old daughter, who was standing next to her father, Nigel Jones, a prison officer, as men erased him, paid tribute to him by dancing at his funeral on Tuesday. Next to his casket, Anya danced to the song God Provides by Tamla Mann as relatives and other mourners cheered on. Heavily armed police and prison officers, together with scores of mourners, attended the funeral at the Irwin Park Sporting Complex in Siparia. At the start of the funeral, Anya recited a Bible verse, Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, saying, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." On November 29, the 38-year-old prison officer was erased as he stood with his daughter at the Faizabad taxi stand in Siparia. Jones and his daughter were waiting for a taxi to go home. Video footage of the drive-by incident was shared on social media. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines, Prisons Commissioner Dennis Paulchan, La Brea MP Stephen McClashy, Prison Officers Association President Saron Richards, and other officials attended. Hines called on God to be with Anya. He said the child saw things, heard things, and experienced feelings that no child her age should have seen, heard, or experienced. This society owes that child all that it can give. This is not Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza. This is TNT, where we make provisions for our children. I have children too. I have a family, and only God knows how those perpetrators feel, the coldness in the presence of that baby. Hines implied that prisoners were behind Jones's demise. He referred to Jones as an outstanding officer and father. Without calling names, he accused people of using a social media campaign with the help of their friends on the outside to convince the public that what they did was right. We reject that. It is an attack on democracy, the well-being of the state of T&T. Hines slammed misguided miscreants whom he said at times choose to do evil instead of good. He commended prison officers, saying that while the public is at home, officers work in prison constantly dealing with managing prisoners daily. He called on prison officers to never let their enemies immobilize them with fear. Paul Chan said in the service's 183 years, officers have seen a new form of deviance of late. He said Jones, a tower of strength, did his job fearlessly and was respected by all. The service has lost one of its greatest sons. Some members within the prison walls feel they must continue their criminality behind bars. We will not allow that behavior to continue, he said. No one individual can bring this organization to its knees. I urge officers to not succumb to fear. Fear only one thing, God. Fear God, not man. He also accused people of using social media to bring down the service. Paul Chan said, "My prison officers daily feed the law offenders. They protect them from themselves. When they are ill, we take them to hospital. Yet that mouth seems to be biting our hands. This is not acceptable. I believe God is the greatest avenger." A friend identified only as Dwayne told mourners that Jones became a father figure to his siblings when Jones's parents separated. He said Anya says her father is in heaven. Dwayne said, "He is in the arms of the Heavenly Father." As his daughter said, "My daddy is in heaven." Officiating pastor Wilma Kelly of the Way of Holiness Church in Point Fortin said she has been working with a prison chaplain for about 25 years. She said prison officers give prisoners money to help them care for themselves. Kelly said many promises were made to help improve the prison system over the years. She said Hines, as a minister, inherited some of the problems. His hands were tied. He tried even before he was Minister of National Security. She threw jabs at fathers who failed to care for their children. She also accused women of sleeping with men and failing to check their backgrounds. Members of the Los Bajos Prison Youth Club movement, the Prison Service Band, and other people paid tribute to Jones. Jones's body was taken to the Siparia Public Cemetery for burial. On November 26, his colleague Trevor Surratt, 48, of Sangre Grande, was erased at his fruit stall in Valencia. His funeral took place on Monday. Three men sentenced for 2009 Barrackpore homicide. 3 men accused of erasing a street vendor in 2009 have been each sentenced by a high court judge. On Tuesday, Justice Norton Jack, after all discounts were given for their guilty pleas and time spent in prison while awaiting their trial, sentenced each man to 4 years hard labor. Rishi Samaru, Rashid Mohammed, and Baxter Roberts pleaded guilty to felony murder after engaging in plea negotiations with the state. Jack began with a sentence of 26 years for each man, subtracting 2 years for mitigating factors, and gave each his 1/3 discount for the guilty plea. The judge then applied the 12 years and 11 days each of them spent in custody awaiting trial, after which they were each left with a sentence of 4 years hard labor. The 3 were initially charged with Ayers' demise, which took place in November 2009 at Trace Barrackpore. Ayers, 42, was driving his car when one of his 3 passengers pulled out a firearm and erased him. Ayers of Douglas Trace, St. Mary's Village, Moruga, stopped his Nissan Almera and ran. He collapsed a short distance away and bled to death. It is believed he and the men were arguing before the shooting. Samaru was represented by public defender Whitney Franklin and Tanya Thomas, Mohammed by attorney Nicholas Rampersad Singh and Alina Ramjag. Roberts was represented by public defender Delicia Helwig Robertson and Manuela Hospitalis. Man erased outside restaurant in Morvant. A 27-year-old Morvant man was erased in close proximity to a restaurant in Morvant on Monday night. Police said members of the Interagency Task Force and the Morvant CID received a report of a shooting on Cipriani Street, Morvant at around 7:30 p.m. They found the body of Kareem Patrick on the ground. A district medical officer declared him dead. Investigators found 19 spent shells. Police do not have a motive for the homicide as yet. Police from the Homicide Bureau of Investigation Region 2 are continuing inquiries. Man beaten and robbed in Aranguez home invasion. Police said the man approached the kitchen door of his house at around 9:20 a.m. He saw the intruder running towards him from behind the house, telling him, "Stay quiet." The intruder pushed the man inside the house and began beating him on the head. He then tied him up with plastic zip ties. The bandit ransacked the house and stole some cash before running away. The man freed himself and called the police. Police from the Northeastern Division went to the house with crime scene investigators. Barrackpore police are continuing inquiries. Landslide victory for PDP. The Progressive Democratic Patriots PDP, a party birthed by its political leader Watson Duke in 2015, resoundingly won the Tobago House of Assembly THA election on Monday. Duke, whose political influence started in 2014 as he held one-man meetings with a bullhorn under a dim streetlight, left Tobago and the People's National Movement in a blackout. The PDP, which won 2 seats in 2017 THA election and then 6 seats on January 25, ended the 6-6 deadlock in the THA by snatching at least 12 seats to take control of the new 15-seat assembly. Exuberant supporters in black and green jerseys in Roxborough, the party's base, could not contain themselves on election night. Beating drums, blowing whistles, waving flags and singing "Let Tracy Go Home." The PDP in 6 years flipped the script and made the PNM the minority in the THA. A battalion of riot police had to be stationed in Roxborough to ensure celebrations did not overly flout COVID-19 protocols. Although the PDP accused the EBC of bias in its creation of 3 new electoral districts, to end the stalemate, a high turnout of voters on Monday gave the PDP an undisputed mandate. Although building the party on his strength and even controversially taking his Public Services Association PSA pension after resigning as president, then not resigning, to support the PDP's election campaign earlier this year, Duke's masterstroke was passing the torch. Some might say the bullify to his deputy leader Farley Augustine. The charismatic electoral representative for Parlevateur Le'Anis Formy Speyside, who won the seat for the 3rd straight time, was a yin to Duke's yang, publicly calling out Duke whenever he crossed the line and even promising to hold him to account. Augustine became the chief secretary the people wanted, more reserved than Duke but similarly passionate about improving the lives of Tobagonians and ensuring accountability and transparency within the THA. The result? A complete dissemination of the PNM at the polls to end 20 years of governance that started under Orville London. The PDP campaigning heavily about a failed zipline project in January 25 election, roped in the PNM to tie the election. A local saying is that all rope has an end, and Monday was the PNM's. PNM Tobago Council leader Tracy Davidson Celestine, who defeated Kevin Charles as PNM Tobago Council leader in 2020, lost her Patience Hill Signal Hill seat. Her post as PNM leader will now be under scrutiny after inheriting a 10-2 majority in the Assembly from Charles. Former Chief Secretary Ansel Dennis, who Augustine had suggested should take over PNM, was beaten in Bucco, Mount Pleasant. The PNM election camp at Shaw Park on Monday was silent as the results came in, reminiscent of January 25, when the PDP tripled its seats to leave the Assembly deadlocked at 6-6. Addressing Tobago virtually after his victory, Augustine said, "Tonight is a special night. I never thought I would win the election and be addressing the entire nation. This is a sign to all Tobagonians. Wherever you are in the world, it doesn't matter the circumstance of your birth, you can ascend to the highest heights." Augustine hailed the input of his political leader, whom he described as the biggest dreamer of all of us. To push his younger deputy in the line of fire, that type of magnanimous gesture should never go unappreciated in Tobago. Although unsure of the final election count, Augustine thanked all the PDP candidates. "We are grateful for whatever victory," he said. Discussing the PDP's approach to governance, Augustine said, "We promise you we will transform this place. We promise we will correct the wrongs of the last 21 years, and that we will do immediately. We ought to remain graceful in victory, because at the end of the day, we wake up tomorrow as one island, even our family, or friends who voted otherwise." Augustine also chastised the Prime Minister for what he described as bullying tactics against Tobagonians. "We have rejected your bullying. The bullying is not welcome in Tobago." Saying he hoped they could share a cordial relationship, Augustine warned Dr. Rowley, "Do not spite Tobago, because the Tobago I know is mighty enough to get rid of you. We are willing to work with you to see this island develop." Davidson Celestine, in her concession speech at Shaw Park, said, "The people decided they want change, and so they voted the other party." Saying the party was saddened by the result, Davidson Celestine promised supporters that the party will look at new ways to appeal to the public. "The party is still strong, and we will not stop until we are able to take control of the THA once again. We will do what we have to do to ensure we are able to represent the people of Tobago in whatever ways we can." Despite the result, Davidson Celestine maintained that the campaign was well executed. "We did offer to the people of Tobago exciting plans to revolutionize Tobago. However, our people would prefer other options." As she congratulated Augustine and Duke, Davidson Celestine, who held the portfolio of Health Secretary, urged people to remain safe and vaccinate against COVID-19. Commissioner Polchan asked the Lord for vengeance at officer's funeral. Prisons Commissioner Dennis Polchan on Monday called on God to quickly exact vengeance on those responsible for erasing one of his officers, Trevor Surrett. At the funeral for Surrett at the St. Francis R.C. Church, Brierley Street, Sangre Grande, Polchan said Surrett was erased by those with no respect for law and order in the country. He said the assailants have a belief that they have a right to create chaos and run havoc. "It is said, 'Vengeance is mine,' says the Lord. I am saying, 'Hurry up, my Lord.'" Surrett was erased on November 26, while at his fruit stall in Valencia. 3 days later, another prison officer, Nigel Jones, was erased while he and his 4-year-old daughter were waiting for transport in Siparia. Jones will be buried on Tuesday. Last Thursday, the 14 men held in connection with the men's demise were all released without charge. On Saturday, their attorney, Roshan Tota Maharaj, sent the Attorney General a pre-action protocol letter threatening to sue for wrongful arrest. He said his clients were only arrested in an attempt to maintain the police service's good image. Paulchen said the prison service will continue to stand firm in doing its job and not falter, and will continue delivering the service the country needs. Surratt was remembered by his son Travis as having a permanent smile on his face, which had the power to change the mood of anyone he interacted with. "My dad was priceless," he said, adding that 2 of Surratt's 3 grandchildren will never know that about him. He added that his father had an unsurpassed passion for his garden. Mourners who knew him were heard agreeing with this, saying Surratt would find ways to mention his garden in almost every conversation. During the homily, Father Matthew Rajbeer called on the nation not to see Surratt being just a number on a hit list, but the person he was. He said, while these are difficult times, there's an opportunity in every crisis, and called on those gathered to take the opportunity to look inside and follow the way of Christ. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines told mourners that Surratt was a patriot. Surratt, he said, followed in the footsteps of his father, retired prison officer Michael Diaz, and came from a family of service members from different arms of national security agencies. Since we got this horrific news, we gathered at the level of leadership, and from that moment we have been exerting best efforts to determine who would have been responsible for this, and to exert our best efforts in finding them. He sought to comfort the family, telling them that from the little he knows, he was satisfied that all was being done to apprehend those responsible. He told the prison service and other arms of the protective service that the government will provide them with the resources to do their jobs, as they understand the level of danger that they put themselves in. We know that the family is inconsolable, but we give you the assurance that we share your burden, we share your pain, and we will do all we can to bring comfort to the family. We will not relent. We are confident of the victory of good over evil, and we will leave no stone unturned in realizing that. Two Tableland burglars sentenced. 2 Tableland men who broke into the home of a 64-year-old woman in the area pleaded guilty before a Princestown magistrate who jailed them. Bobby Sieshasai, 47, and Junior Dilpole, 46, faced Magistrate Indira Misira Gosin on Friday, the day after police held them. The court heard that the victim, a housewife, locked up her house at around 9:40 p.m. on Wednesday, but around 3:30 a.m. on Thursday, she was awakened by noises and saw 2 men in her bedroom. She alerted other people and the men ran away. Tableland police officers were contacted by PC Dibole, and other officers later arrested the 2. The court heard that Sueshasai had a dildo and a sex toy. The men who live in the area entered the woman's home by prying open a window. PC Dibole charged them jointly with 1 count of burglary. Sergeant Shazid Mohammed prosecuted. He told the court that Sueshasai had several convictions for similar offenses, as well as for having narcotics. However, Dilpole did not have any previous convictions. The magistrate sentenced Sueshasai to 12 months imprisonment with hard labor and Dilpole to 3 months. They also pleaded guilty to malicious damage to a laptop. The owner lives next door to the housewife. The court heard that the men entered the kitchen area, scattered food on the ground, and damaged the computer before leaving between Wednesday night and early Thursday. Misir Gosin sentenced Sueshasai to 12 months imprisonment with hard labor and Dilpole to 3 months. Woman found dead after dispute with boyfriend over Hickey. A 24-year-old security officer is assisting police with their investigations into the death of 31-year-old Shadi Dasrath. The security officer told police that he found Dasrath lying unresponsive on a bed in her La Romaine apartment on Friday morning, hours after they had argued over a hickey on her body. Dasrath had a wound on her forehead. Police are awaiting an autopsy to determine how she died. The security officer told police that Dasrath returned to her apartment at Temple Street around 11 p.m. on Thursday. He said they argued over a hickey on her body and she went into the bedroom while he stayed in the living room. He told police that sometime after 1 a.m., he went into the bedroom and found her unresponsive on the bed. He alerted the other tenants, one of whom is a police officer. Police officer went to Dasrath's apartment where he saw her nude body on the bed and contacted the command center. When the other officers arrived, they observed the wound to the middle of her forehead. District Medical Officer Dr. Manisha Santlal viewed the body and ordered its removal. An autopsy is expected to be done next week at the Forensic Science Center following a COVID-19 test. Investigations are continuing. Woman accidentally injured at restaurant by FUL holder, recovering in hospital. A 28-year-old woman who was shot after a patron's gun reportedly accidentally discharged in a restaurant and bar over the weekend says patrons should be screened for weapons before entering these establishments. In a telephone interview from her hospital bed on Monday, Crystal Ramesar said contrary to reports, she was shot in the stomach, not the leg. However, doctors at the San Fernando General Hospital have told her they will be unable to remove the bullet. It is lodged in my muscle, so if I try to take it out, it will cause more complications. They are hoping it will come up to the surface over time, the 28-year-old real estate agent said. The incident took place shortly before 4 a.m. on Sunday, while Ramesar was at the Rising Star Restaurant, Grill and Hookah Lounge at Hilda Lazari Terrace in San Fernando. However, there are different versions of what transpired. The police report stated that a 36-year-old contractor from Golconda, the holder of a FUL, firearms user's license, stood up from a bar stool to adjust his clothing and the gun accidentally went off. The report said Ramesar was seated in the dining room area when she was shot on the left upper thigh. However, according to a statement issued by the proprietor, Chandrika Prasad, the man was at the bar having drinks with his friends, and moments before the shooting, he was allegedly seen adjusting his gun. It stated that Ramesar was shot in her leg while returning from the restroom. Ramesar yesterday could not recall whether she was standing or sitting when she was shot. I could have been standing at the table. It happened quickly. I heard a loud noise and felt a sting in my abdomen. I thought someone had popped a bottle of champagne nearby and the cork had hit me. Then I realized people were panicking because something was wrong. I walked across to my cousin who was at the time paying the bill. I felt my stomach and I saw the blood, she said. Ramesar said a waitress then took her to the stock room. She said, "That's when we realized there was a bullet wound. We tried calling the ambulance, but we could not get through. My cousin put me in his vehicle and took me to the hospital." She said it was the first time she had gone to the establishment since the restrictions were lifted. Ramesar said she was only allowed to eat solids yesterday, but her body is sore. While Ramesar was advised by doctors that she would make a full recovery, she will be seeking a second opinion on whether or not the bullet can be removed. The man was questioned and released by police pending further investigations. In his statement, the proprietor reminded customers that weapons were not allowed in his business place. Corporal Griffith of the San Fernando CID is investigating. Former COP Gary Griffith reveals that he had to put Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley in his place. Former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith said he was forced as Commissioner to put Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley in his place because Rowley kept interfering. Griffith indicated this in an interview last Wednesday with Ishan Ishmael. Griffith was asked when was it that he started to feel a level of discomfort with the Prime Minister. Griffith said, "Well, I constantly realized the Prime Minister was not aware or was very green in understanding his role and function as chair of the National Security Council because he kept getting involved in things that were outside of his authority." Griffith said, "Somebody who is probably too young at heart to understand the concept of what a prime minister has to do in national security, or another minister who is lacking hindsight." These individuals continue to give the Prime Minister wrong advice as he felt as head of the NSC, "I could intervene, I could interfere, I could direct," he added. Griffith referred to statements by the Prime Minister from platforms such as when he said he was going to bring people from foreign to probe the DSS or probing firearms. Griffith alluded to a special branch officer whose job was to collect suitcases at New York Airport for 6 years. He also cited the appointment of retired Justice Stanley John, whose report, he said, went to the NSC. The Prime Minister kept interfering, and with that, I, as Commissioner, was forced to put him in his place. Detailing reasons, Griffith said, with the Bayside Towers pool party protocol breach issue, basically Rowley was alluding to trying to inform TTPS officers to break the law when they lacked the authority to arrest people in their homes. He said there was an Attorney General and National Security Minister who didn't brief the Prime Minister to understand that for the police to enter homes, you must have a state of emergency similar to 2011. He said if he hadn't spoken out, many police officers might have thought Rowley was right, and there would have been hundreds of millions in legal damages that taxpayers would have had to pay. He said in doing so, the Prime Minister took offense to that. But that's your problem, Griffith added. On people advising him to have respect, Griffith said he'd said worse things about opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar when the UNC didn't want to approve the bail bill. "What you trying to tell me? As a commissioner, you can criticize the opposition leader, but not the Prime Minister?" He said over 20 police chiefs criticized former U.S. President Donald Trump, telling him to shut up. But this is a banana republic. "I'm a PNM supporter, and you must speak well of my Prime Minister," Griffith said, sarcastically imitating detractors. "It doesn't work that way. I was an independent COP, and I wasn't going to have anyone direct me wrongfully."